6 Republican-controlled states are suing to block President Biden from erasing billions of dollars in student loan debt. It's the second lawsuit filed this week to stop Biden's plan.
The Biden administration is now reversing eligibility for debt relief for some students. Around 770,000 people with privately held federal student loans will be impacted by the change. For more on this, I want to bring in Terry Haines. He's the founder of Pangaea Policy, which predicts government actions for the financial markets. Terry, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We're happy to have you. What's the reasoning behind both lawsuits filed this week?
Both lawsuits, and to be clear, the two lawsuits are filed in different courts, one in Missouri and one in Indiana, but they're very similar arguments. The idea basically is this. The president can only do two kinds of things. The president can do things that Congress tells him to do by law, or the president can do things that are kind of inherently constitutional. In other words, things that he's been given to do by Article 2 of the Constitution. The assertions in both lawsuits essentially are that he doesn't have any constitutional power to do this, firstly. Secondly, that education policy has been put down by Congress and given to him with, sort of obvious limitations. And the limitations that the president has don't permit this kind of action. The Biden administration says that it does, but they're relying on a 20-year-old law that originally was passed in 2003, right after the Iraq invasion, to make it easier for servicemen and women to deal with their student loans. So what the state attorneys general are saying and the private lawsuit is saying essentially is that the Biden administration shouldn't be allowed to blow a hole through that particular law and proceed as it will. They're asking for either temporary relief, temporary restraining order, or an injunction to stop the administration temporarily from doing this.
Well, Terry, given that background, what you just laid out, and given your own sort of knowledge of that precedent, how can we expect, you think, the lawsuits to play out? What's your take on it?
Well, I think today, at least one of these federal courts is likelier than not to stop the Biden administration from going forward by granting either an injunction or a restraining order. And the reason is pretty simple. I mean, I wouldn't give the administration no chance of prevailing here, but the reason is pretty simple. Firstly, if you're asking for relief, you have to be able to say that you might be able to, that you're likely to be able to prevail on the merits. And it seems to me that based on what I just said, so there's a pretty good case for saying, the administration is trying to blow a hole in this much more limited law. Secondly, you have to show that there's real harm that will occur. That's a little bit tougher to do, but the idea is that student loan forgiveness actually negatively impacts all taxpayers, and since the governors represent taxpayers, and so does the private foundation, they're more likely than that. Thirdly, all they're asking for is temporary relief to be able to argue the thing on the merits. So I think a judge is likelier than not to say, okay, let's just wait a little bit here, see what everybody's got, and let's see whether the Biden administration should be able to go forward under the existing law. That's pretty much it.
Terry, as we mentioned, President Biden is scaling back his student loan forgiveness plan. We've been talking about it. Tell us more about the impact, which you touched on, but what would the impact be behind this decision?
Well, it's basically the tweak that the Biden people have put into place yesterday, I think it was, is essentially to say, look, you can't take your private loans, things that existed before 2010. You can't take your private student loans, convert them into federal loans or consolidate them with your federal loans, and then expect to get that entire relief. The administration is being clearer that what they're doing here is excluding purely private loans from this particular program. As a practical matter, it doesn't have any effect on the arguments that the states and the private foundation are making. Their view is that the president has neither the legal nor the constitutional authority to go forward with this thing, and it is novel. I mean, whatever else you think of it, it's not been done before, so it is novel. And what they expect is that a judge will at least call a temporary halt to it.
More to come. Terry Haines with Pangaea Policy. Terry, thanks very much for sharing your expertise with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.